If you haven't seen it, I do highly recommend the movie Red Tails. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, resentment against Japanese Americans accelerated, especially in California. Executive Order 9066 ordered the relocation of Japanese Americans to internment camps. The citizens' homes had to be sold quickly or abandoned. Although the camps were clean, they were really a prison. Internment camps violated the Fourth and 14th Amendments to the Constitution, and in 1989 the U.S. government made a formal apology to surviving internees.
There were 5 in our family, an older sister, a younger brother, and my parents. And each of us was allowed to take one suitcase. But it was too much for my brother and for me. So from a family of 5, we only had 3 suitcases.
Wow.
Every family was issued a number.
There were 6 units in a barrack. They were non-insulated buildings. It wasn't even this big, but it had a window on one side and a window on the other, one incandescent light. There was no sink, no bathroom, no stove, but it was just a barren room and 5 cots.
What kind of food
did you have?
You know, they tried to cook rice, but it was either too soft or crunchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And lots of pork and beans. It was not our normal diet.
The principal allies in World War II consisted of the United States under Roosevelt, Great Britain under Churchill, and the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin. After Pearl Harbor, FDR focused energies on Germany. The German Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, had been extremely successful, and Germany was occupying much of Europe. The Allied goal was to roll back the German and Italian forces. North Africa became the site of the first joint effort by American and British forces. This campaign was successful under the command of U.S. Major General Patton. Patton then went on to fight in Italy. Vernon Baker served with distinction in the Italian campaign, although he did not receive the Medal of Honor until much later.
Being young and not very happy, I was getting ready to get myself into trouble. So I sat down one day and I talked to my sister, and she said, well, Vernon, why don't you go join the Army? So I went down to the recruiting station, and I walked in, and there was a big, fat, burly guy sitting behind, big sergeant sitting behind a desk, and he looked up and said, what do you want? I said, I'd like to join the Army. And he looked up at me and said, we ain't got no orders for you people. Well, that kind of turned me off, so I left there. So I went back, and I couldn't find a job for about 3 months. And in June of 1941, I told Cass that I'm going to try to go back to and join the Army. And I was the adrenaline was flowing, because if this same guy was back in there and he treated me before, I was going to punch him in the nose. But I walked in, and there was a very pleasant young-looking sergeant sitting behind a desk, and he said, can I help you? I said, and I still had my hand on the doorknob, and I said, yes, I'd like to join the Army. And he said, well, come on in and sit down. So I sat down, and he said, well, what branch of the service you want to go in? And I said, quartermaster. And I was watching when he was writing down, and he wrote down infantry. I didn't say anything because I was in.
Upon enlisting in the Army in June of 1941, Vernon Baker was assigned to the segregated 370th Regiment, the first black unit to see combat in World War II. Common at the time was the practice of placing black fighting units under white officers, a condition that occasionally heightened the existing tensions of combat. On April 5, 1945, Baker's unit was ordered to assault the German-occupied mountain stronghold near Viareggio, Italy. Numerous Allied battalions had already tried to take the heavily fortified position, but none were successful.
There were three hills, X, Y, and Z. And we went from X to Y to Z and then to the castle. The whole regiment had been trying to take Castle Aganolfi. And battalion by battalion, they went up, they got cut to pieces. And when they got back down, or were driven back down, we knew it was our turn. There was a nice path going up the hill, and I'll bless Captain Runyon, and I'll always bless him for this, even though I didn't like him. He walked up on the outside and stayed on the rocks on the outside of the path, and I was right on his heels. When I got up to the top, I heard explosions behind me. That was some of my men in my platoon. They walked in the center of the path, and they were stepping on these mines. We started moving up Y. We got out, and we looked down, and there was a big, deep draw. I didn't know how to navigate it. Captain Runyon got up to me, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. When this German came out right below us, he stopped, and he saw us, and he took this potato masher and threw it at us. A kaleidoscope of things happened. Captain Runyon yelled and jumped up and almost knocked my rifle out of my arm. I'm trying to level my rifle to shoot him. I finally shot him before he could get out of sight, and the grenade didn't explode. It was a dud. Somebody was sitting on my shoulder. I don't know. I was looking down the path, waiting to see if there's somebody else coming up there, and Sergeant Dickens came running out with a submachine gun. He carried a submachine gun all the time, and he asked me, said, "You okay, Lieutenant?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "I'm going down to see what's down there," because nobody else came up. And so I started down, and he said, "Wait a minute," and he tossed me his submachine gun. So I took it and took the submachine gun and went down. I was just full of adrenaline that day. I went down and it started curving around back into the hill, and I saw this door off a car in the side of the hill covering the entrance. So I took a grenade. I had 4 grenades with me, and I took a grenade and pulled the pin, and I moved away from it. When it blew open, nothing happened, and I was just getting ready to go to look in the hole, and the German stuck his head out. He was half asleep, and he stuck his head out looking around, so I shot him in the head. And I went on down and tossed the grenade into the opening, and there were 3 more in there. I went on down a little farther, and there was another dugout. And I just took a grenade and tossed it in there. Blew that door open, and there were 2 more people in there. Sprayed the place with the machine gun, cleaned it up. After that, I went back up on the top, and when I got back up on the top, they found out that we were there. They had located us, and mortar and machine gun from the castle was just saturating the area. And I located Sergeant Dickens, and I asked him, I said, "Where's Runyon?" And he didn't know who Runyon was. I said, "The company commander." And he said, "Oh, he's in that house over there, a blockhouse, a little blockhouse." He was in there, and he was sitting on the floor with his knees rolled up like this. He was sitting on the floor, and he had his head down below his knees. And when I walked in the door, he looked up at me and said, "Baker, can't you get those men together out there?" I looked at him, and I told him, I said, I'm trying the goddamn best I can, Captain. And then about 2 or 3 minutes later, he said, "Baker, I'm going back for reinforcements." Well, I got my senses together, and I told him, "Okay, Captain, you go ahead. We'll be here when you get back." I knew he wasn't coming back.
Deprived of command and control, and taking heavy losses, Baker's platoon was left to find its way back to the Allied line. The next morning, Baker voluntarily led a battalion advance on the German position, routing the superior force and securing Castle Agonulfi for the Allies.
Every once in a while, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the guys. I think of 19 souls that gave their all for it. If not for them, I probably wouldn't be here myself.
Baker's actions in the battle earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. In 1996, more than 50 years later, he received a call from a man working on a federal grant to reassess the role of black soldiers during World War II.
He said, I'm Professor Gabron from Shaw University, and the United States Army has given us a $350,000 grant to research into why no black soldier had received a Medal of Honor from World War II.
President Bill Clinton awarded Baker the Medal of Honor in January of 1997, making Vernon Baker the only living black serviceman from World War II to receive the honor.
The black soldier was very much ignored, and I feel that the black soldier made quite a contribution to winning the war.
While men like Vernon Baker were fighting their way through Italy, plans were in the works for the ultimate Allied invasion of Europe across the English Channel. On June 6, 1944, hours before dawn, 4,000 ships and a force of 150,000 men stormed the beaches of Normandy. On June 6 alone, 5,000 Allied troops were killed or wounded at Normandy, but within 2 weeks, 1 million men were ashore. Eisenhower selected Omar Bradley to land in France and opened up a new Allied front. World War II was a war fought on two fronts. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, General Douglas MacArthur was ordered to abandon the Philippines to take command of the Allied Pacific forces. As he left, he promised to return. On the same day as Pearl Harbor, Japan invaded the Philippines, and in April of the following year, 75,000 U.S. and Philippine troops surrendered. The Japanese drove the POWs over 100 miles to a prison camp. More than 5,000 men died in the Bataan Death March. The Allied strategy in the Pacific was known as island hopping. Once an island was secured, they would move on to the next one. The American naval victory at Midway was the turning point in the war. The U.S. successfully wiped out 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. In 1939, physicist Albert Einstein sent President Roosevelt a letter warning him about the dangerous German advances in the studies of nuclear fission. FDR responded quietly, redirecting military funds into research that grew into the top-secret Manhattan Project at a laboratory compound near Los Alamos, New Mexico. It became Truman's decision to use the atomic bomb after the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his 4th term. Truman's decision to use the atomic bomb stemmed from the desire to limit American casualties and end the war quickly. The first bomb was dropped on August 6th on Hiroshima. Approximately 70,000 people died instantly. The second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on August 14th. Another 40,000 died immediately and caused Japan to surrender on August 14th, 1945. World War II was officially over. Nations in Europe and Asia sustained massive damages. Approximately 50 million people died during World War II. The United States had escaped most destruction of its homeland except for the attack on Pearl Harbor, and so post-war rebuilding fell on the U.S. this is when we enter into the Cold War era. And we're going to talk a lot about the Cold War next week, so I'm not going to dive into it very deeply this week. We've already been going for almost half an hour. But be ready for some major look at the Cold War next week.